you say, oh, my Heavenly Father, and He loves me, and yes. But now when you're a father, you look from the perspective of being a father to a child. Now you can better relate to the perspective of a Heavenly Father looking to his children.
Hey, and welcome back to another edition of ManCave. We are in part 2 of what did it feel like to be a father for a first time. So I'm gathered here with some more of great men from our staff that are fathers now. So let's just dive in. Joe, what did it feel like to be a father for the first time?
Oh, wow. It was just a few years ago. So honestly, I've never really shared this publicly, but during my wife's first pregnancy, she actually went through a bout of peripartum depression. And so the last trimester of our pregnancy was kind of stained with visits to a psychiatrist. And it was so stressful that honestly, I didn't know if I, or the baby would make it. It was overwhelming. And so what felt like should have been one of the happiest moments of my life, because I'm a believer, and so God had told me our first child was going to be a son, and I had his name. I heard it, in the heavens, because, I'm so spiritual and deep. And then we were in this moment of great tension. And then Zach came. Zach, as foretold by the Lord. Like I didn't even need the doctor to tell me that I was having a son. I already knew it. And we got to that moment in the hospital, and I didn't know if peripartum depression was going to turn into postpartum depression, because women can go through a whole cadre of emotions around what happens in their bodies during the development of a baby. And so we were in the hospital. They don't let you stay as long as my mom did. I think we were in there 2 days and 3 nights, or 2 nights and 3 days. And on the second night, they made us keep the baby in the room. About 3 o'clock in the morning, I heard my wife in the room with the baby singing, and it was the first time I had heard her sing or show any joy in the last 3 or 4 months. And it was something about that moment that made me finally say, we're gonna be okay. And she was singing to Zach, "We get to go home." I don't know where she got this song from, but it was the piece of joy, because there was so much uncertainty. How did I feel the first time I became a father? Scared, because I had the responsibility of this life, shaping a life of a Black man who would maybe end up being a big Black man in America. It was all this pressure and the fear of what was going on emotionally with my wife. But our great God brought us through that. Zach is 3.5, or he'll be 4 in a few weeks. And we had our second baby, and there were no issues with that. But just all of the emotions that came along with her first pregnancy were overwhelming for us. But our faithful God did bring us through that, and we're happy, and everyone is well, and we survived that. And now we're raising young men who will be future leaders.
Yeah, that's good. There's so much right there that we could just dig in, because everybody wants you to be happy. You're having a baby. You're doing this. You're doing that. You're doing this. You should be grateful. There's a blessing, but you can't control the chemicals, the imbalances, all the types of things that you just don't know many times of what will happen in that. Thank you for opening that up, because that's an angle and a side that they don't talk about, but I pray and I hope that people were inspired by that. What about you, Keedron?
It was exciting, but then it automatically went from excitement to fear, because we were expecting our daughter Symphony to be born in December, and she ended up being born in August. She was 1 pound, 7 ounces. I'm 19 years old, but the doctor comes in and tells me that my daughter has a 50-50 chance of living. I didn't get a chance to hold her for months. We had hope, but not realizing The journey that we were going to be on, because you hear stories of premature births, and it was just tough. So we tried to make sure we were there as much as possible in the hospital for those 3 months, and being there by her side and praying for her. And so it was tough at first. It really was. We named her Symphony Forever, because we were like, she's music to our ears, but she's gonna be our baby no matter what, And so it was hard, but it was still beautiful, a beautiful story coming through that. So we just had to hold on to each other, and then the hope that we had that she was gonna be okay.
Wow. What about you, Lorenzo?
Yeah, well, it was a process to be able to hold my daughter for the first time. I remember I used to work at Target, and this is back in the day, right? So we actually had pagers, okay? So when you had your wife was having a baby, you get the beep, beep, beep.
You tell me
yeah, I'm going way back, okay? So yeah, I had a pager, right? So I'm literally, I work. It was like 60 miles away from where my wife was. And I get this page. And so beep, beep, beep. I'm like, hey, I'm having a baby. Let's go. So I'm on the freeway, man. I'm flying. I'm doing like 80, 90 miles an hour. Now, in my mind, I'm thinking, where are the cops at when you need them, right? Because I'm thinking to get pulled over so I can say, I'm having a baby. You got to let me go, right? There wasn't one off. I went all those miles at 80 miles an hour. Nobody stopped me. All right. Now, I had taken Lamaze classes with my wife. Yes, breathe, and, rub her arm, and, you're going to count to 10, and she's going to be all right, okay? So I'm like, I'm ready. I got this going through my mind that I'm going to do all these things. So I get to the hospital, and the doctor says, every time your wife turns, the baby's heart stops. I'm going, well, what do you mean? She goes, yeah, on her stomach, she's okay, but when she turns to the right, the baby's heart stops. So make a long story short, her umbilical cord was wrapped around her neck. Wow. And the doctor says, we need to go in for an emergency C-section. Emergency C-section. Now, wait a minute, I'm not prepared for an emergency C-section. I'm prepared for Lamaze, let me take care of you, get you all together, right? But so the doctor walks out, he comes back in, and he was dressed like a Darth Vader character, right? He's got a shield on, he's got his outfit on, and he throws me a bag and says, suit up, we're going in. And I'm standing there like, what do you mean we're going in where? I go, I'm ready to do the Lamaze, and now we're going in. But so we get into the operating room, and again, they have the tarp over your wife, so you can't see. And I said, let me take a look behind the curtain. I looked behind the curtain, I was like, oh. That's what's going on back here. Look back in the front, I go, are you okay? She's like, I'm like, oh, okay. And so anyway, we did the C-section, and my daughter was born, and they lay her on the table. So I still haven't get to hold her yet. And they say, well, do you want to cut the umbilical cord? And I'm like, yeah, I'll cut the umbilical cord, no problem. So lady gives me the scissors. Nurse gives me the scissors. I have my mask on, and she goes, okay, just cut it right here. So I go over to cut the umbilical cord, and I'm like, wait a minute, hold on. This thing is tough. I'm thinking I'm gonna cut it like a piece of paper. So I'm over there trying to look cool, right? But I have lost all coolness. I am sawing through this umbilical cord, trying to cut through this thing, and so finally, after they got all wrapped up and they did hand her to us, it was something to really behold. All the other stuff I had forgotten about, and to see her, to look in her eyes and to hear her cry, and to know what she had come through to get to this point was really a miracle. So I knew that my life would never be the same after that.
That's solid, man. I love that. I love the pager too.
Yeah.
What about you, Quinn?
Kind of in the same light with the other stories, just having a plan and then having to adjust to that plan. Yeah. My wife had going through the whole process of thinking, a natural birth, all these things. And then we got there, and my son Landon's heart rate started dropping. And it kept going that way. And they were like, okay, you have an option. You have to do the C-section. And she really didn't want to do it. And this is where I first learned about the support and being that helpmate for my wife. And it's carried us throughout this journey with Landon, just always being there with her. Yeah. And even if it's a decision that she has to make that she doesn't want to, knowing that I'm there with her. Yeah. And we made the decision, and then kind of, do you look behind I chose not to, but then when they brought him out, we saw why the situation was. He was so broad up top, he couldn't get through the birthing canal. So there was no way he was going to be naturally birthed, and they didn't tell us that. So he had to come the way he came. And now just looking at the pictures and being able to hold him, it was like, okay, this is kind of like how I was, just broad up top and a lot bigger. So it tells you the story that God's going to get you how he's going to get you. He's going to get you there no matter what. And just keeping that in mind with him, always remembering your journey to get here, but you're also going to be a journey throughout the rest of your life, and I'm always going to be there with you. So no matter what you go through, good, bad, or indifferent, we're always here to support you.
Yeah, that's solid. So I would say what changed for you? Perspective, insight. It seems as though everybody has this moment of preparation, but life and this process went a completely different route than you expected it to. I mean, Nita and I, we went to the Lamaze class and we was just in there laughing and cracking up and breathing.
Right.
Like, are you gonna breathe like this on that day? We joked the whole time about the Lamaze, and I was in the room before we got. I was in the room trying to do all the breathing stuff. She says, "Stop, stop! I am hurting. I'm in pain. Please give me a shot." She wanted the doctor to give her a shot, but it seems as though everybody has a different. You were prepared to do one thing, but something took a different route. So. What changed for you?
I think for me, the relationship that a father has to a child, the relationship that our Heavenly Father has with us, I think that made it, to me, it made it more, it was more real. I think because, you say, oh, my Heavenly Father, and He loves me, and yes, but now when you're a father, you look from the perspective of being a father to a child. Now you can better relate to the perspective of a Heavenly Father looking to his children. And, I'll never forget, I told my youngest daughter, I said, the relationship that we have, that I could tell my daughter to run, if I was on one side of the freeway and she was on the other when she was little, and I say, come here, she would dart across the freeway and get to me no matter what. Didn't care about cars, didn't care about anything, because of the love that she had for me, that unconditional love. And I know you guys talked about that earlier. It's this unconditional love, and that brought to me more so what this unconditional love really meant, to sacrifice everything in order to get to you, to sacrifice life in order to get to you. That's what having the children did for me. That's what it taught for me.
I started to understand flexibility more. I am a slight OCD person when it comes to tidiness and order and things in their compartment, things in their proper place. Everything has a home. All my spices are lined up. My pots and pans are nested. My closet is organized. I'm a very anal when it comes to things like that. And being a father just taught me to be flexible. I never wanted to be the step on the Lego dad. I never wanted the toys on the floor and the disorder and the chaos, but I've learned the beauty in the chaos. I've learned to find our own rhythm in defining what life is, and also being a learner and not just an instructor. So my son is 3, but he teaches me things. And I've learned to observe some of his wisdom in seeing the world from a different perspective and not having the conditioning that I have, like going to the playground and walking up to someone of another race, a little girl, and just pushing her out the way, because as far as he's concerned, his space is a priority. But I'm thinking, no, don't touch that little girl, because, and I don't want him to be rude, but I also want him to have some determination when it comes to his space, and his comfort is a priority. And so learning to learn from a kid and unlearn some of the stuff that I programmed myself to say, this has to be this way. I've lost some of my rigidity when it came to just what I felt was the order of my life. And it hasn't been complete chaos, but there's this beauty in okay, well, maybe everything's not in place, or maybe there are a few toys on the floor. Maybe he doesn't put everything back in the bin. And so just learning, I think what you said about having to make adjustments in becoming a father, I think the continuation of fatherhood is that constant adjustment. What kind of father will he need me to be? What kind of coach will he need me to be? We took him home to my parents' house a week ago, and Zach can't flip. I'm like, I need to teach, I'm not athletic, but I need to teach this boy something, because when his cousin went to flip, he just flopped on the ground. And I said, no, I need to be able to be for my son. It made me want to, like you talk about that God image. When we look to God, I am. What can I become that he needs? And so that for me is flexibility.
Yeah.
That's good. I would say one thing that changed for me is the understanding of my presence, like the significance of my presence, because it started off hard. We were young parents, and then our daughter was born premature. And so one thing I learned really quick was when we were in the NICU with our daughter, when she was in the incubator and she was in there, and we couldn't really hold her at the time.
Yeah.
And I didn't want to be all like in the way. But the nurse said, no, like, come as much as you can. Your presence is important. So even when I couldn't hold her, I would put my finger in there and let her hold my finger. You know what I mean? I would rub her back. We would be there for her, understanding that even though we can't do as much as we want to, but being there still was impactful and significant. And so throughout our life, I always remember my presence as a father is significant, regardless of how, it may feel or seem. Being there in the first place matters.
Yeah, yeah. Just to kind of piggyback on that, because you made me think about Mason, being his lungs had not developed, and and I was a little bit like, well, I determined I wasn't going anywhere. And the lady said, no, this is perfect. One of the nurses, one of the nurses trying to get me out of the way, but one of the nurses, she was an older lady, and she said, you know what? Be here as much as you want, talk to him as much as you want, touch him as much as you want, because it's a part of his healing process. Yeah, that him hearing your voice has the ability to speed up the healing. Because his lungs had not fully developed. So she said, you could talk to him, sing to him, hold him, feed him. He needs to be a part. He needs not to just have your scent, and know that you're there with him, but all of this is a part of the healing process. And that's powerful. What about you, Quinn?
For me, it was just finding the perfect foundation. First being in God, but then being able to tandem with my wife and make decisions that were the best for us. I think the hardest thing being a parent is hearing all these stories and getting all this advice, some good, some bad, but just knowing, okay, I can cherry pick this, cherry pick that, but still know within my house, this is what's going to be the standard. This is what's going to be the thing that carries us through raising this black man, like Joe was saying earlier, because there are a lot of things that we were taught as kids that now it's like, okay, as an adult, it's like, that might not have been the best decision. That might not have been, our parents did what they could with what they had. So now that, because my parents had me when they were 22, I had my son at 30. So the years in between, the maturity time and the just life skill adaptation moments allowed me to do some things and impart some things into my son that my mom and my dad couldn't do because they didn't know. So now it's like, okay, how are we going to do this? Whether it's sports, whether it's just creating that global citizen that's upstanding, that's going. We don't spank, we don't hit, we don't do that because we learned, okay, this doesn't really create the environment.
I hit.
I mean, but it was just, but I also learned from my son, he doesn't respond to that.
Right.
Yeah.
So it was,
what works for you.
Yeah.
And it goes back to that, whereas he can hear my voice throughout the house, and that's what triggers him. And I was the same way with my dad. He didn't have to touch me if he looked at me a certain way. I didn't want to disappoint him. So just knowing that, oh, okay, I have to do this, no matter what grandma says, papa says, friends say, oh, why y'all not doing it? No, this is what works for us. And long as me and my wife are on the same page and in agreement, and I think that's helped our marriage even more, because now it's like, okay, this is a team and we can't fracture this team, not even for him. And we've learned to kind of navigate through it, and we're still learning, because there's a lifetime journey that we're going to be taking, all three of us. So it's just making sure we have that foundation in place.
Yeah. I love kind of like how Joe, this whole notion of flexibility. I think fathering is not just a fixed mode of consciousness. It is being present, and then also being able to be flexible and learning your kid's personality and learning the difference between your children, and then loving and then caring and then nurturing, and the power of your presence. But I do think that sometimes that flexibility can only come when there is pressure that is applied through circumstance. And all of us have had these circumstances that shift our perspective. You know what I mean? Instead of resisting it, we're embracing it. And that's what I hear. It's like, so if you're watching us, and it could not even just be in the area of fathering, it could be in any area of your life. It could be financial, it could be in your career, it could be in your marriage or relationships, whatever. Sometimes, I believe God uses those circumstances in our lives to shift our perspective. And sometimes we resist it. Sometimes because we don't want to change. We want everything to change around us. We want everybody to adjust to us. But many times God is really prompting us to shift in our perspective of how we see ourselves and how we see the world and how we see the people around us. And maybe you're out here and you're about to be a father. You tuned in and you're about to be a father, or your spouse just had a baby, or you're a baby father for the first time. I mean, I don't know, or the second time or the third time, whatever it is, wherever you find yourself, be open to your perspective being changed. Be open to the flexibility that just because things don't happen the way that you think they're going to happen doesn't mean that all is lost. I mean, his baby was in NICU for months. Joe and Talisha dealt with the depression piece. I mean, they had to have C-sections. The C-section, it was an adjustment, it was a shift, it was something that, you're really not even prepared for. But your ability to adjust to the fact that this is going to happen the way it's going to happen, and I have to still be present, is your charge. Sometimes you can't control the circumstance, but you can adjust to the circumstances around you that allows you to be present in those moments. So I want to encourage you, fathers, that maybe you're at a moment where things are just out of your control. Find yourself in a place where you say, what is this moment requiring of me? And how can I still be present for my children? How can I still be present for them, so that they know that, guess what, at the end of the day, I'm here. And maybe you won't have you're dealing with a baby. You're dealing with someone who can't look back up at you and say thank you. You know what I mean? But still embrace the moment, knowing that they know your presence, that they know when they're loved, that they know when they're around people that really, really care for them. So it's the power of your presence. So be present, fathers. Hey guys, thank you for joining us for another edition of ManCave. There's so much more. Man, you have tapped into something incredible. This is the month dedicated to fathers. This is the second installment. This is part 2. Man, we're so excited that you're on this journey. Man, shout out to all all the folks, all the fellas on the panel, man. Powerful stories. Hopefully you gained something. You gave insight, perspective that will help you on your journey in every area of your life. Man, thanks again for joining us. We'll see you next episode.